Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Adventures. And today, we're going to be doing another episode, this week part 16 of our Planet Zoo mod splites, where we go have a look through and have a look at some of the mods that wonderful community's made. So, we're going to be starting today with the Kirk's Dik-dik by Leaf and Bubbly Wums. That's pretty cool. So, we'll have a quick look. See, it's quite small there. See the baby one there. The adults are really so big as they are, so we'll look at the male. So, Dik-diks are some of the world's smallest antelopes, and the largest species is the Kirk's Dik-dik, which is this species here. So, it's the largest of the smallest antelopes. So these guys get between 14 and 18 inches tall, and no more than 7 kilos. And female Dik-diks tend to be a little bit lighter, a little bit heavier than the males, And they have these very prominent proportions that look very cute. You can see the males are the only ones with these horns. And the coat can change on their habitat, depending. It'd be grey to grey-brown with tan flanks and a head crest and all that. So the males have these short horns that are about 3 centimeters long, and they are backward slanted and they're like corrugated. So you can see here they've got these like little lines going down them. I think that's corrugated, that's the term. And it also just depends on like the individual as well. They're also believed to be sexually dimorphic, with females are larger and lacking horns, while the males have a more developed muzzle. They have a longer crest, and they tend to be lighter in colour, so there's slight sexual dimorphism between the individuals, between the sexes. So, even though they're very similar to the Gunther's Dik-dik, they have longer nasal and premaxillary, they have longer than that. And they also have a shorter proboscis, which is like the nose here, so they're a little bit shorter in profile. That's how they're distinguished. These guys are highly adapted to live in like arid regions across Africa. So they have like a hairy proboscis with tiny slit-like noses, similar to the, as aforementioned, Goethe's Dik-dik. So they have a large nasal chamber that can carry a rich amount of blood. That means it allows them to dissipate heat easier, and it's very effective, and also gets rid of minimal loss of water, since in a desert water is very important. So these things, like also other water and energy conservation methods, such as having a lower metabolic rate, fluctuating body temperatures, and concentrated urine and dry feces, are other ways that they trying to conserve water in these desert environments. And these guys, another way is that they are highly nocturnal, so they can move out in the cool of the night and don't really go out too much in the day, because that's when it's warm. See if we can find a female to talk about. That's another male. Let's go find a female. Here's a female. Isn't she pretty? So, these guys are endemic to eastern and southwestern Africa, primarily in the Somali and southwest arid zones. And they just have like a very interesting distribution. They have a pretty unique habitat, since they have very specific requirements. So it's most likely that during some time, like maybe the Ice Age or something, their habitat would have connected, so they would have split. So they just have very isolated habitats that are perfect for them. And these guys are also herbivores. They mainly like fruits, foliage, shoots, and berries. And they rely on... They don't really drink much water, since there's not much water in the deserts. They rely mostly on the food they eat to get the water that they need. And they also have a pretty big stomach capacity. Their mass consists of like 10% of their body mass when full. So they have like half a kilo of food in their stomach, which is pretty interesting. And they pretty much just ruminate and feed periodically through the day and night. So they try and avoid the day, since it's nice and warm. They want to go in the cool of the night. And these guys live in monogamous pairs or on territories, so they'll defend a territory, and they use urine and dung to defend their spots, and they maintain these pair bonds. And then they have a gestation period of about 5 to 6 months, and may produce up to 2 offspring a year. So females reach sexual maturity at about 6 to 8 months, while this occurs in males about 8 to 9 months. And they produce 1 offspring per gestation, so they could have probably 2 in a year. Most births occur between November or December and April through May, which coincides with the timing of the raining seasons. And at birth, they lie concealed for their mother about 2 to 3 weeks, and the survival rate of fawns is roughly 50%. So it's literally a 50-50 chance your baby survives. Once offspring is a certain age, they begin to participate in bonding rituals and remain with their parents until other offspring is born. And yeah, these guys are preyed on by a whole bunch of predators. They're kind of like the base of the food chain. They get eaten by wildcats, jackals, caracals, leopards, cheetahs, hyenas, wild dogs, crocodiles, pythons, lions, monitors, humans even. And they're particularly preyed upon by baboons, genets, and eagles. They seem to like them, and that's why they have very advanced hearing and stuff. And how do they get the name Dik-dik? So the Dik-dik comes from their alarm call, which sounds like the Dik-dik. So if you hear a Dik-dik in out, it'll sound like Dik-dik. I find that funny. Sounds like Dik-dik. So humans are the greatest threat to these guys. They're often caught in snares, like from poachers, and they're often used for jewelry and also bushmeat. And while they're considered least concern, there is chances of the population, if they're overexploited, they might not be able to recover. So yeah, we've got that Dik-dik out of the way. Good Dik-dik. So now let's move on to the next animal. We've got another leaf mod. This is just leaf by himself this time. We've got the eastern grey kangaroo. So I feel like these animals have very explanatory names. So this is an eastern grey kangaroo from the eastern Australia, the eastern third, and have a population of about 7 million, so they're considered the least concern. They're also known as the great gay kangaroo, well, not gay, grey, Pride Month much. Although the big eastern male could typically weigh about 66 kilos and stand about 2 meters tall, and they are a bit smaller than the red kangaroo that can get up to 90 kilos. So they're the second largest marsupial, second only to the red kangaroo. An adult male can get between 50 and 66 kilos, and a female gets between 70 and 40 kilos. So they're very easy to recognize. As you can see, they have this like grayish coat, and they're quite big. So when the range overlap, it's much more different to tell between eastern and western greys, even though they're closely related. So usually just where the locale is, as they live on the eastern side of Australia, or western grey kangaroos would live on the western side of Australia. So you'll find this guy around Sydney, Queensland, places like that, and you'll find the others about Perth and places like that. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. I'm not an expert on geography. So these guys are found most often like in... while red kangaroos are found in the interior of the continent, these guys are found on the eastern side, so they like more areas with more rainfall, so they have a lot more live in a lot more forests and grasslands rather than the inside of the continent. So it includes coastal areas, woodlands, subtropical forests, and inland scrubs, so things like that. And they're mainly nocturnal and crepuscular, so they only come out really during the night or early afternoon, late afternoon and early morning, so things like that. And they live in these big groups, like grey kangaroos. They live in these big groups with dominance hierarchy, so the biggest male will kind of defend his group of females, and the biggest male gets the best pickings of the food. And like other kangaroos, they can breed super fast, so a female can pretty much be pregnant with one, have one living inside her pouch, and then one living just outside of her and only going in a pouch occasionally. They breed super fast, so but replace themselves really quickly. That's part of the reason they're so common, just because they can replace themselves at a very fast rate. And it's probably thought that they have increased their populations because of humans, like have opening artificial water sources that these guys are entering from. But we don't really know about that. That's what is commonly believed. And there's some areas where these guys actually cause overgrazing, and there's been big culls around these guys. And despite these harvests and culls, they tend to be very widespread, and you can even get kangaroo meat. I've had kangaroo meat before. It's very nice. And yeah, I think this is a really cool kangaroo, really awesome animal. Cool to see, like, even though we already have this animal, we already have the red kangaroo, it's cool to see mods that just like pretty much just add more diversity. Like simple diversity but good. So I like this. This is a good mod. Good job, Leaf. And now we've got another antelope. A pretty weird looking antelope. Let's have a looky-loo here. So this is Gerenuk, or how you pronounce it. Gerenuk, or called the giraffe gazelle. And you can see how awkward it looks. It really does look like a giraffe. So this is a long-necked antelope from the Horn of Africa and other parts of Eastern Africa, drier parts of it. So these guys get to about 80 to 105 centimeters tall and weigh between 28 and 52 kilograms. And you can get these two types of coats. You can get the lighter flanks, or you get another type with like only males are like a lighter shape. But look at this. Let's get like with the male here. Real lean looking fella, isn't he? Pretty cool. So these guys are diurnal, so they move usually during the day and stand like at rests and shade in the noon. So they forage throughout the day, with the females apparently spending longer time feeding. And the Gerenuk may expose itself to rain to cool the body. And even though these guys fighting and travel is uncommon for these guys, so they tend to be have like a home range and just stick to a certain area. So these ranges can be between 3 and 6 kilometers, but they will overlap with others, and they maintain them with scent guarding and like with poo and pee, like other mammals do. So that's how they maintain their territories. These guys are also primarily browsers, so yeah, if you've seen pictures of them, they'll get up on their back legs and graze in like short trees, almost like a bear or a ground sloth, even though it doesn't look nothing like it, but it's really cool to see them rear up. So they eat whatever they can. They can eat trees, shoots, herbs, flowers, fruits, pretty much whatever they can. And they can actually reach up to like over 2 meters tall and get that kind of vegetation, which isn't available to most other animals. So it's a pretty interesting niche that they occupy. And they tend to eat things like acacia trees and pretty much when that's available, and just eat what they can really at that height. They're very, very flexible with their diets. So they do not drink water regularly as well. So similar to the Dik-diks, they tend to get most of the water that they need from their food. And these guys are often common prey for things like African wild dogs, cheetahs, hyenas, lions, and leopards. So a female reaches sexual maturity at about 1 year old, and a male about 1.5 years old. And they typically only breed after they've established themselves a territory. And the gestation period for these guys is about 7 months, and they're born at about 3 kilos at birth. And these guys are pretty cool, and they can live up to 13 years in captivity and up to 8 years in the wild. So these guys are doing pretty well. They're considered near threatened, so there are threats to these guys like habitat loss and things that could put these guys at risk. I just say how lanky that thing is. Let's have a look at the baby. Look at this cutie. Cutie. You can see the baby Roo there, aren't they adorable? Now we're going to be moving on to another Leaf mod. See, Leaf is producing mods like they're going out of style. Pretty awesome. So we have got the marine iguana. So this is pretty cool. So this is kind of like a combination mod. This is also a mod that people have been making of taking the iguanas out of the exhibits and making them habitat animals. So this is kind of an extension of that. So that's pretty cool. So these guys are also known as the sea iguana or the Galapagos marine iguana. So they're iguana only found on the Galapagos Islands off the coast of South America around Ecuador. This is technically a marine reptile, and it feeds on algae, which makes up most of its diet, which is pretty cool. And also, these large males are able to dive for these food sources, and the females, the smaller males, tend to hang out in low tide with these intertidal territories. They also live in colonies and rocky shores, similar to like how seals do. They'll have like an area where they'll bask and stuff. And they technically like to bask after they've finished visited cold water or intertidal zones, and can often be seen in marshes, mangroves, and beaches. So these large males will defend these territories, but smaller males will kind of like try and sneak in their way to try and get themselves a female. And after mating, they'll dig a nest hole, and the female lays her eggs in. So these guys are so cool. And they reach sexual maturity at about 3 to 5 years old, with the female reaching about, with males reaching about 6 to 8 years old. That's when they sexually mature. And they have been aged up to 60 years, which is pretty long for a reptile. Mainly, that is still quite a long time, especially for a big animal like that. Look at you, aren't you wonderful? Wonderful boy. So they typically live in these large colonies of about 20 to 500 animals, but sometimes even more than 1,000, so you can see them all holed up on the beach, almost like seals. And they feed on, as I mentioned, all these different kinds of algae that they dive for, and it's pretty interesting. Also, they feed on things like crustaceans and insects, and sea lion feces even. That's pretty weird. And even after birth. That's some weird things you didn't expect them to eat, but you can't be beggars can't be choosers. So that's a good way to get extra nutrients that they can, if they can. And one cool thing about these guys is that since they live in water, salt water, they need to get rid of all the excess salt, so what they'll do is they'll sneeze it out. So they go, and it goes out, so they don't need to worry about too much salt getting to their body and dehydrating them. And these guys are considered vulnerable, and in some areas they're even considered endangered. So the reason is that they live in very high densities, but they live in a very small area. They only live in the Galapagos Islands, and they have a very particular habitat that needs protecting. And I believe the estimated populations in the archipelago is between 200,000 and 300,000, but that could be at risk just because it's such a small area. Other things like introduced predators of the Galapagos, which have recently kind of been taken out, like goats, pigs, cats, and rats. Places like that feed on their young, and they are ecologically naive. That means they're not used to predators like this. It happens on a lot of islands, like New Zealand, the Galapagos, Australia to some extent as well. It's very, very hard to escape these animals since they're not adapted to them. But these guys luckily are now protected in most of their range, and a lot of animals have been eradicated from these islands. There's lots of programs to restore and make sure and get rid of these invasive species in the Galapagos, which is pretty cool. And yeah, these guys are pretty cool. Look at this. Marine iguanas is just one of my favorite animals. I love them. We've got marine reptiles around today. So we've got another matured. So now we're going to be moving on to another really cool animal I love. We have got the Père David's deer, and we can have a look at this male here. This is by Narwhal. So the Père David's deer, also known as the Mulu or the Elaphorine, is a deer that's was found in the valleys of China, where they grazed on mainly grasses and aquatic plants. And these guys were hunted to almost to extinction in native China in the late 19th century, but they were saved from extinction where they took some specimens back to zoos and they found them in British nobility, so they were thought to be extinct until they were found by these noblemen, and were like, oh wow, we can actually save the species from here. So these guys are considered extinct in the wild, and there's a population of about 10,000 or 8 to 10,000 I think it is, and they are usually kept in zoos, parks, game parks and ranches across the world for hunting. And there's about 700 in reserves in China, so they're trying to reintroduce them back into the wild. About 700 individuals. And these guys get pretty big. They can get to about a little bit smaller than a red deer. They get between 1.9 and 2.2 meters long and stand about 1.2 meters tall. They get to also about 335 to 200 kilograms and have this really long, slender head. And they have these wonderful antlers. I love their antlers design. It almost looks like a Dr. Seuss animal to me. So they have like a reddish tan to their coat in the winter, and then it changes to this dull grey in the winter. And they're also semi-aquatic, so they do enjoy hanging out in water. They're pretty much the only deer that likes that. So they have a gestation of about 9 months, so the same as a person, about 280 days, with a single offspring is born, but sometimes twins. They are also considered seasonal breeders because 3 out of 4 calves born are born during April in captive European populations. So the breeding season, 160 days within mating season until June or July, and that's when they're usually breeding. And they tend to be born at about 11 to 13 kilos. And they have a spotted coat on them, seen like most species of deer, and they're also known to develop very quickly, and they reach sexual maturity about 14 months old, and they have an average lifespan of about 18 years. So these guys are also sort of becoming ecologically naive, because these populations, there haven't been any wild ones known for about 1,200 years. So the issue is that these animals in captivity have kind of lost how to be aware and how to keep your eye out for predators like lions, tigers, and leopards. So you got to be very careful with introducing them. So there are programs. They're kind of extinct the wild because there's no wild animals left, but there are programs across the world trying to bring them back. So like zoos, game parks are breeding them up, and they're trying to use their numbers and breed them up so they can release them into areas in China. So that's pretty cool. We'll have a look at a female. I really love their face. They got this really long face. I think it's awesome. Have a look at the baby. So Nawala did a good job with this one. This is actually probably one of my favorites. I love this animal. I love Père David's deer. I think they're just so cool. Wonderful animal. So now we're going to be moving on to the black-footed ferret by Leaf. Again, so look, we got more Leaf mods. So let's have a look at this cutie. This is also a pretty rare animal. So this is the black-footed ferret, also known as the American polecat or the prairie dog hunter. So these guys are roughly the same size as a mink. And these guys are very specialized in eating prairie dogs, and they used to live around the Great Plains. But the very, very sad stories of these guys is that they declined through the 20th century because there was efforts to try and get rid of prairie dogs, and there was a big plague going through the prairie dog populations, which greatly affected these guys. And there was they were declared extinct in like 1979, but there was a wild population found in Wyoming in 1981. So there was a captive breeding program that they tried to bring their numbers up, and they were reintroduced and now they're reintroduced into 8 different states across the US, and also in Canada and Mexico. And there's, from 1991 to 2009, about 1,000 mature wild-born individuals. So there's a self-sustaining population coming about, so that's good. And they're all descended from only a few. I believe they're only descended from... I think 8 or something like that. But these guys, also, there was a really big story. These guys were also cloned. Just in 2021, in February, there was a cloned black-footed ferret named Elizabeth. She was cloned from an individual that did not breed from the original population. So she has unique genetics that are not in the population, which really helps the species, because when you get a lot of animals that are related to each other, that decreases genetic diversity and puts them more at risk of diseases and stuff. It's very sad that these guys were very common, and now they've just reduced into only about 1,000. But they're doing well. They're considered endangered now, so their populations are going up, and they're being bred across the place. Wonderful animals. So as I mentioned, they pretty much just eat prairie dogs. So that's part of the reason why they were so at risk, because they just ate those. And the main issue also was that they also are susceptible to canine distemper. So that's also introduced. That affects a lot of animals like skunks, raccoons, foxes, badgers, and coyotes, and even wolves. And that kind of virus just really messes with populations. You can see it in Africa, even like lions and hyenas and wild dogs get it, so they're very much at risk. So this species is on the up and up with cloned individuals, so that's pretty big in terms of science, and I just think these guys are really cool. Wonderful animals. Have a look at the adult. They have a really cool pattern tool too. Yeah, that's a nice one. So now we're going to be moving on to the next animal. We have got, this is a subspecies this time. This is the Indian leopard. So this is we got a melanistic one, and we've got the cubs as well. So this one was done by Haruki Ishinos, along with Havoc 1199 and Gaboni. So this is a kind of a joint mod effort. So these guys are a leopard subspecies from, of course, the Indian subcontinent. And they're considered vulnerable because of habitat loss, fragmentation, poaching, and illegal trade of skin and bones and other body parts. And they're one of the big cats that live in this area, along with Asiatic lions, clouded leopards, snow leopards, and Bengal tigers. So in 2014, there was a consensus to look at how many of these guys were around, and there was about 7,910 in the surveyed area, and estimates of their population is about 12 to 14,000. So they're doing quite well in India, at least. So these get quite big. They get between 127 and 142 centimeters in body length, with a 76 centimeter long tail, and weigh between 50 and 77 kilos for males, and between 29 and 34 for females. So males are much larger and heavier than the females. So these guys are found around India, Nepal, Bhutan, and parts of Pakistan. Bangladesh used to have occasional populations, and they do still have occasional sightings, but there isn't really any evidence of any living there. And these guys, like other leopards, they are solitary, elusive, and largely nocturnal. They tend to hang out in the trees where they drag prey, and also pretty powerful swimmers, so they can get across rivers and such. Very good at dispersing. And where they live, they can breed all year round. So the estrus cycle just lasts 46 days, and the females usually heat from 6 to 7 days. The gestation lasts from 90 to 105 days, where the cubs are born, and they're usually born with 3 to 4. Let's have a look at this melanistic one. That's pretty cool. Pretty awesome. So these guys are also born in a little tree, and the cubs are always cute. And that's a scientific fact, of course. And they're born with their eyes closed, and they open about 4 to 9 days after birth. And yeah, as I mentioned, these guys have large threats from the illegal wildlife trade, from poaching, also conflict with people. There's been reports of them being man-eaters, and also they will attack people's livestock, which is obviously not good. And they are protected. They're considered extremely protected because of that. And there have been efforts to make sure that the trade, obviously illegal animal trade is a very big issue, especially with animals like pangolins, rhinos, elephants, tigers, and those guys, because they're believed to have medicinal properties, which are very not true, and it's just trying to get a way to get money. The only reason people poach these animals is because they want the money. Look at these cute guys. Look at these cuties. But they seem to be doing well. They're considered vulnerable, so they are at risk from these factors that I mentioned, but overall not doing too bad. So now we got our second to last animal. We've got a dolphin again. Where are they? Here we are. So this is Tuluxi, also known as the Benfoguris or the Benfo Negro. I believe that's how you pronounce it. These are freshwater dolphins found in the rivers of the Amazon basin, and also like the coasts of from Central America down to the Brazil and Orinoco River. So that's pretty cool. So these guys are kind of both freshwater and saltwater. These guys are found in tight groups of about 10 to 15 individuals, where they chase fish at the rapids with dashes and stuff and try to catch fish. They're believed to be about 30 fishes are known to be their prey, and some living in protected channels which occur in fast-flowing rivers. That's pretty cool. Is that a juvenile? No, that's an adult. Look at these cuties. They're wonderful. So the Tuluxi is endemic to these regions and are considered endangered, of course, because of things like mercury poisoning in the water. That's a big issue globally. Mercury poisoning, getting into large predators, since they get into the animals, and then as it goes up the food chain, it kind of accumulates in these large predators. Another issue is habitat fragmentation, because of people dividing up their habitat, of course, especially along coastlines and in rivers where these guys will hunt and forage. And they're considered Appendix 2, so that means you're not allowed to really, without a permit, export any of the animal's body parts. And yeah, there's not too much known about this guy, because he's just too epic to be understood. And they're not a very big dolphin either. They get to about 1.5 meters long, and they have this light bluish grey on them, so they're not particularly big dolphins, but I think they're wonderful just how they are, and they're very cute. And they should be protected. Very cool animals. Let's have a look at the other ones. So this one was done by Leaf as well. So Leafs really do be pumping out these mods. Really wonderful. Love the patterns on these guys. Love seeing them swim around. I love how we can even get these marine animals and animals just swimming around now. Just feels so right. It's awesome. And now, for last but definitely not least, we've got something big. If you've seen on the thumbnail, you probably know. So this one was made by Nicholas Lionrider, probably the OG Zoo Tycoon modder. Bubbly Wumps, Leaf, and the model was originally made for Zoo Tycoon 2, Aurora Designs. We have got the Orca, or the killer whale. Look at that little baby there, though. We're going to have to, before we get started, you can't change the size of the baby, so this is absolutely hilarious. Look at this. Look at that. Look how tiny it is. I just had to point that out. What are you guys hanging out here for? I think they want to get out, but they can't. I'm not sure what's up with that. There they are. So this is the big male. Obviously they can't climb on land like this, but this is because they're based on the otter, but we'll just wait for them to go swimming. Maybe we can speed it up a little bit. Let's just see if we can get them swimming again. There we are. So look at this big male. Look at him. He's wonderful. So, orcas, also known as killer whales, are the largest member of the oceanic dolphins. They can get quite big. They get 7 to 9 meters long and weigh to, I believe, 10 tons. So they're the biggest. With this big dorsal fin that's like nearly 2 meters tall. Enormous. They just look so enormous, especially in this tank right here. It's wow. Look at that, wonderful. So, and they're 6 to 8 tons, whatever. Yeah, that's a better size. So, these guys are found. They're called a cosmopolitan species. So they're found pretty much all around the world. You can find them from the Arctic to Antarctica. Literally any ocean you can find these guys. They're found everywhere. And they have like almost these clans. Pods will have all sorts of different diets. So there's clans that are called like transitory. So that means they'll eat like whales and stuff. There's coastal clans that only eat fish. And there's like all sorts of different... It just depends on the culture there, but all sorts of different cultures and stuff. That's really awesome. So, as I mentioned, they're found everywhere. There are also many different types that are considered as species or ecotypes. We don't really know what to consider them, but there's just so much variation within the species. So as I mentioned, as they eat all that... What's that? Oh... You're not liking me today. Let's find the female that was in here. Here we are. Ooh. Come on. It's not what I wanted to click. I want to click you. Ah. It's not what I wanted to do. See, it's not going right today. So let's just keep looking at these guys. Can't click into the water, it's kind of annoying. Let me just go through here then. Oh, we won't worry about that. Oh, this is annoying. That's the big male. Let's do that again. There we are. We got it finally. So we can see this. We can see the baby there. So these guys are literally found anywhere. There's populations believed to be about 50,000 to different areas. There's 25,000 in Antarctica, 2,000 in the northwest. So it's really they just live everywhere. And they eat everything. They eat pretty much everything that isn't a plant. And different pods will specialize in different things as they learn to hunt them. So like some in New Zealand specialize in stingrays. Some populations specialize in eating whales. Some populations specialize in eating salmon. Things like that, for example. And they are super, super smart. They can learn pretty much. They actually learn sometimes when they want to hunt things like great whites or sharks. They turn them on their side or turn them upside down so that it renders them. They pretty much go into like a not catabolic, but like a hypnotized state where they don't move, which is really, really cool. And they also have these very complex social structures, so they live in these pods where they'll be like led by the main female, and they'll be kind of like extended family. And males sometimes will even just lead to do their own thing. So how they will meet is that they'll stick with their males will stick to their same group, but they'll just be looser. They might just go off and do their own thing, might meet some females, have some babies, and go off and do their own thing. So that's really, really cool. So they're called loose aggregations, called pods, but you usually get like different pods that combine, and they will combine to like hunt prey, and especially big prey like whales. They do hunt the whales, which is really, really cool. That's why they're considered so intelligent. So these females get to about age 10 when they become sexually mature, but they usually don't breed until 20. So there have been populations of these whales. There's a whale called Granny that's believed to be over 100 years old, but I think she died recently. I'm not sure if she's alive. But males will get sexually mature about 15, but do not usually reproduce until they're 21. And wild males live to average 29 years, a minimum of 60 years. So, kind of like humans, we may be sexually mature, but they don't necessarily breed as right as they're sexually mature. It kind of takes that emotional maturity to try and get up and get ready to breed. Just wonderful animals. and they live in these large groups. So these guys also, like other animals, there's big issues like I'm trying to think. Issues like pollution are the big things, guys. These guys were also hunted, kind of just like other whales. They were also habitat disturbance, oil spills, another big thing. People killing their prey species, so overfishing is another big thing. They can get caught in nets. So it's really just, they're such a big, they live everywhere, so there's so many different conservation issues that they kind of have to deal with, and it usually individualized to those populations. So like populations in Antarctica will have to deal with climate change, and populations in New Zealand have to deal with a lot of boats, because a lot of people have boats. And kind of like with sharks, they also had that killer stereotype, but there's no recorded deaths from a wild killer whale, but there have been 3 deaths from captive killer whales or orcas. And if you guys know about things like blackfish, there's a big controversy about having these guys in zoos and aquariums like SeaWorld, and a lot of people are like, should we add them into the game? But looks like they didn't even need Frontier to ask, they just get the modders in. And I just have to say, this is a lovely mod. I love seeing these whales. Killer whales are just such interesting animals. I've seen killer whales in the wild, and just wonderful animals. Just so interesting to think how big they are and how smart they are, and a really awesome mod to have. It's really cool seeing them swim around too. This is a huge thing I made for them, and they're quite small, but yeah. So I think this is a good place to end it. Sorry about that big thing before. Let's see what this is going on. Oh, we don't need to worry about that. That's a bit wild, but yeah, I think this is a good place to end. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, always remember to click that little bell icon to get notified when I upload anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.